How's it going, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Today, I'm going to be going over how I do my TA, all of the different ways that I find significant levels, and the way that I find these significant levels of confluence. And pretty much the way I like to trade is I like to do the TA ahead of time, whether it's the macro TA for a larger range or whether it's more local TA, like a local range. I like to find the levels, and I look for areas of confluence, areas where we have lots of things pointing to one area or level. And I just simply set alerts at these levels. I wait for price to come to them, and I will check my indicator. I use Market Cipher. I know other people use other indicators, but Market Cipher is what I use. And pretty much I will just check Market Cipher for confirmations as we approach these levels. Specifically, I look for bullish divergences, money flow trending in a direction. And that is really the way I like to trade. I've noticed that the more work I put into doing the TA to finding these levels and preparing for them ahead of time, the better off I am, the easier it is to find these good trade setups, and the easier it is to execute on them because, you're just more confident in them because you put in the work to find them. So I'm going to be going through all of the levels that I mark out and how I find those juicy areas of confluence. So, some of these levels I mark out when I do my daily TA. Some of them I mark out when I do my weekly TA, typically on Mondays. So, it's nice to find your own schedule for doing TA and, kind of fit it to your trading schedule. But starting off with the weekly levels, weekly levels are pretty easy to find. You're just going to go to the weekly time frame. You want to look for a level where two of these candle bodies lay flat with wicks above them. So for 2 weeks in a row, price tried to get above this level, but it failed to, and these levels that the weekly candles close at typically act as significant levels. So I take a horizontal ray and I use the magnet tool to get it to snap to the exact level, and I'll just mark that out. I like to make mine yellow, and I will just mark this as a weekly level. And what you'll notice about this weekly level is that since we made this weekly level, since this weekly candle printed, price has not come back up to touch this level. So actually this weekly level is a bit more significant than one that has been touched before. I like to mark these as N weekly. And typically when a level is untouched, it's going to be more reactive on the first touch. So, if we come up to this level, there is a stronger chance that it is going to be reactive. So I just go through, I mark out all the significant weekly levels. Some people like to go really far back with weekly levels because they tend to be, very significant. Even if they're old weekly levels, they'll still be significant. But to keep things organized, I typically just mark out the most recent weekly levels, and I'll keep those organized in a folder. And those are going to be some of the most significant levels that I use, especially when I can find confluence with other levels. But yeah, that is the first thing I do is I mark out weekly levels. Then I mark out my daily levels. So what you want to do with this, basically the same exact thing except you're on the daily time frame. So you're going to be looking for those levels where the candle body's closed with wicks above them. And, same as the weekly levels, I mark those out. And if they are untouched, I mark them as N daily levels. So, I can just know very quickly that this is a significant level just by turning on my folder. So yeah, I just do the same thing. I will go through and mark out the daily levels. Now, there's going to be a lot of them, so it can get cluttered, but I like to mark out the most significant ones, the ones especially if they're on like peaks or valleys. And I also like to look for the untouched ones because here's a great example of an untouched daily level being very reactive. You'll see that once we printed this daily level, we didn't come back to touch it until right here, and when we did, we got a very nice reaction off this level. And this was about a 10% move, so this is, no joke of a move. If you had this daily level marked out and you had an alert set here, that could have been a very nice trade to take. So, yep, I just go through and mark out all the daily levels. We do have another N daily level right here. And so I'll mark this level out because I'm going to expect this level to act as resistance once we finally come back up to touch it. And like I said, this can get very cluttered, especially once you start, marking all of the daily levels. So I just like to keep them in a folder, keep them turned off, and when I need them, I can turn the folder on really quickly, see if there's any confluence with the levels that I have in mind. If not, I'll turn them back off. But it is very handy to have these levels on hand for when you need them. So I like to mark them out and keep them updated every week or every day. And yeah, those are, like I said, some of the most significant levels that you're going to get. Next, we just have S/R. I could put I here because these are going to be just levels that we're marking out with our I. So for these, I like to do support resistance levels for macro ranges like this. I like to mark out the most significant support resistance levels that I see. If I'm doing TA on like a local range, then I might mark out some of the support resistance levels inside that range, but the ones I keep in the folder on hand are going to be, the most significant support resistance levels that I can see. And, you can see that these levels are very much respected. So I'll just go through and mark out the levels where we found the most support and or resistance. Because again, I will just turn this folder on and off and see if one of these significant support resistance levels lines up with a level that I have in mind that I'm looking for confluence at. So, same thing with the weekly and daily. I just keep those in a folder ready to turn on if I'm looking for confluence. Okay, next we have volume levels. Now, there's a few different ways that you can get volume levels. My favorite way to get volume levels is by using the fixed range volume profile, which is available for everybody. It's free on TradingView. What you're going to do is you're going to click on this drop-out menu, and all the way here at the bottom is the fixed range volume profile. And what this does is you just click on whatever range you want to check the volume of, and it will give you a volume profile of that range with a point of control, a value area high and low, and it will also show you the volume inside the range. Now you can change the settings of these to make them look different. These are the settings that I use: 200 row size and 70 value area volume. And I grayed out the up-down volume on the outside, and I made positive volume blue, negative volume purple, and the point of control is white. So those are the settings that I use. And you can use this fixed range volume profile on all different kinds of time frames. I do locally and macro, and sometimes even more macro. Like I will take the volume of this whole move, and these volume levels can be very significant as well. So the fixed range volume profile is a very, very powerful tool. And a lot of the time when I'm looking for these significant levels of confluence, I am basing them around some of these volume levels, like the point of control or the value area lows or highs. A lot of times I will base my TA off these levels and then try to look for confluence around them. Like up here, you see I have a golden pocket right near this value area high. If I turn on my other levels, let's see, do we have anything else? We do have a naked daily level up here that I marked out, so already I'm finding confluence right up here in this area. Turn on my support resistance levels. We do have a support resistance level a little bit above this naked daily level, but I could just put a rectangle right around this whole area and consider this very strong resistance for us. Now, some other levels that we can mark out to look for even more confluence is ndPOCs, or naked daily point of controls. And you can get these even if you don't have paid TradingView, but it is a bit more tedious. So if you do have paid TradingView, the tools that I use to get ndPOCs are Session Volume Profile and Session Volume Profile HD. And the reason I use both of these is because the HD will change slightly based on how much price action is on the screen. So if you zoom out, it will change slightly. If you zoom in, it'll change a little bit. So basically what these tools do is they just give you a fixed range volume profile of each individual day. Now, if you don't have paid TradingView, what you can do is just use the fixed range volume profile and just click on 20 when the daily candle closes. Drag that over to the next day at 20. Then it will give you the fixed range volume profile of that day. So you can do that for each individual day and get something very similar to this. It's not always going to be exact because the point of controls don't always line up, but that is how you can do it if you don't have paid TradingView. But it is much easier just to use this tool. And what you're essentially looking for with these ndPOCs is ones that have not been touched once that day closed. So we have a great example of that right up here. So I would mark that out with a horizontal line. I would type ndPOC on that. Seems like we have another one right here. So I can mark that out as well. And I will just do this for all of the ones that I see. Typically, if we have a very strong trend, like a downtrend, we'll form a lot of these on the way down. So it's nice to mark these out for resistance levels on the way back up. And I'll group all of these in a folder, just like all the other levels. You'll see I already got these ones marked out. And some people like to use weekly point of controls, monthly point of controls. They'll just use the fixed range volume profile and draw it over a week or a month worth of price action. And they'll mark out those point of controls as well for some extra levels. So another tool you can use to get some significant levels, I don't do this that often, but I might start doing it more just to try it out to see how it works. But you can mark out the VWAP snaps. Some people mark out the daily VWAP snaps. As you know, the VWAP will snap to price action every day, and you can see that right here. Here's an example of it. VWAP is right here. When that day ended, it snapped right to price. And typically these levels that the VWAP snapped at can act as significant levels, and some people mark those out. So you can mark those out, keep those in a separate folder as well. And I might actually do that because it doesn't hurt to have more levels to check for confluence with. So can mark all those out. I'm not going to label all those right now. I'll just put those in a folder, name them VWAP snaps. And then the last thing I have on this list is fibs. Now, I don't like to keep a lot of fibs on my chart. If I do have fibs on my chart, I usually keep them in a folder for like macro or local TA. Like you'll see with my macro range right here, I have one fib drawn right here, the most significant one at the moment. If I pull up my local TA, if I zoom in, I've got a few fibs pulled in here. Yeah, I got this fib from the top to the bottom, and then I got another fib from the bottom to the top. So I like to keep the most significant fibs at the moment labeled in a folder somewhere, but for those of you that don't know how to use fibs, basically, if you are trying to pull a fib for this price action, the most significant one you could say would be from the swing high to the swing low. But what you can do is you can actually adjust the high that you take it from And as long as, it's going to the most recent low, or if it's vice versa, if you're taking a fib, let's say from the lows to the highs, as long as it stays at the most recent high that you are, price is getting a retracement from, you can take a fib from any of these lows and, it still can act as a significant level. So when I'm looking for Confluence with a local level, I'll pull fibs from, all sorts of swing highs down to the swing low that I'm looking for a retracement from. But, that's basically just how fibs work. You're measuring the length of a move and it's giving you retracement targets based on that length. So, but, for example, let's say I'm looking for some Confluence with that point of control. I can pull a fib here, and I mean, already you see the 382 lines up with this point of control. But now let's move this fib down to another swing low, or swing high, excuse me. And right here, you see if I take the fib from this wick right here, and you can see that the golden pocket lines up with the point of control as well. So yeah, I like to, take fibs from a lot of different places and use them to look for Confluence. Okay, so now we got, pretty much all the significant levels marked out into individual folders. And now the goal is to try and find those significant levels of Confluence, those levels where a lot of, the levels that we marked out line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse engineer these levels that I have marked out. And I guess we will start from the very bottom down here at this local level. So right here, I have this box marked out. It says N weekly, ndPOC, and point of control. And I could also label this 382 and golden pocket because, like you just saw, we had some fib levels lining up with this area as well. So, maybe I can adjust this slightly, and I'll add 382 on here because it is the 382 of this entire move, so it's going to be a significant fib level, I'd say. And pretty much the way I found this level originally was I noticed we had a point of control here, so I said, okay, let's open my folders and let's see, do we have any Confluence here? So I saw that we had the weekly open, the N weekly. So there's one Confluence. I opened my ndPOCs. Notice that we had an ndPOC here as well, almost lining up perfectly with the point of control too. So that is pretty significant. And like you just saw, we had those fib levels there as well. So I'd say that this is going to be a very significant level of resistance if price comes back up to it. You can also see that, we held support on this area here. We found some resistance over here, resistance over here. So I'd say that this is going to be a pretty significant area for us. And so what I would do here is I'd mark it out with a box and I'd set an alert front running this level a little bit. So I'll get an alert on my phone as we're approaching this level. And, I can look for some bearish divergences as we're coming up here. And if I see my confirmations, I can take a trade there. I did the work ahead of time. I planned out this trade already. I'm planning for it who knows how long in advance. Maybe we come up here in like a week. And, whenever it happens, I will get an alert on my phone and I can check market cipher as we are coming up to that level. So now looking at this next level of resistance, you can see that this says point of control, value area high, and ndPOC. So it is the value area high of this local range. It is also the point of control of this macro range. So already that is some pretty strong Confluence right there with the volume levels. And it also says ndPOC on it. So if I turn on my ndPOC files, you'll see that we have one lining up almost perfectly with the macro point of control. So that is some even more Confluence added onto that. And then we can go through, even turn on some of my other folders, see if there's something I missed. And, well, one of those VWAP snaps that I marked out earlier just happens to line up right in this area as well. So that is some interesting Confluence there. So I guess I can write VWAP snap on here as well. And, same deal. I have an alert set at this level. So as we approach it, I'll get an alert on my phone. And I can check for my confirmations as we come up to this key level. And that is pretty much what I did for all of these as well. I have some Confluence with some Fib levels, the 382 of this entire move, plus the golden pocket of this more local move, and says S/R in here. So turn on my support resistance levels. You can see that this is significant support resistance. Let's check some of my other folders. This is also a daily level, as you can see here, so I can write daily in here as well. Okay, it is a weekly level as well, I guess. So I'm just going to get rid of the daily and write weekly. That is more significant. And I'll actually adjust this box a little bit. So there we go. I have an alert set at this level as well. So that is another significant level of Confluence. Up here, we have a SIG support resistance level right there, a naked weekly level, and a 786 fib level from this move. It's hard to see because it lines up pretty much perfectly with that weekly level, but some more Confluence up there. And then up here, we got the value area high, golden pocket, and a naked daily level. If I turn on my daily folder there. And let's see, do we have anything else? We do have a SIG support resistance level in here, so why not write that in there? And, this is pretty much just what I like to do. I like to go through and check all my folders and see what kind of Confluence do we have in this level. Another thing I forgot to mention is CDWs, and, I guess I can write that in here right now. CDWs / swing failure pattern. So what you do with CDWs is you just want to mark out a significant wick, one that, represents a high or a low, like this one up here. You could even say this one because, since this wick printed, there hasn't been a wick higher than it. So, you could mark out this wick up here, could mark out this wick, could mark out this wick. And what can sometimes happen with CDWs is price will come up. It will take out that wick quickly, but then dip back down below it, just leaving a wick above the level. And sometimes that can be confirmation to get into a trade, or it can at least add confidence, especially if you already have that level marked out. So, you can mark out the CDWs there as well. And I do have a folder for CDWs actually. Got one marked out right there, got some marked out down here. But, that's pretty much what I like to do. It can, get cluttered at times, which is why I like to sort of simple it down to these boxes where I just find the most Confluence. And, you can mark out these boxes for macro ranges or, if you're a day trader, then you can just mark out the local areas of interest. But yeah, same thing applies pretty much when I'm doing local analysis. Is I just check my folders, I check my levels, see if we have anything lining up with some of these significant volume levels or fib levels of the range. It seems like a lot of work, but I can pretty much do analysis, marking out all those things I talked about in like half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on, how far back I go. And, doing that work, having these levels set in folders has really benefited my trading. Being able to mark out these key levels myself has also really benefited my trading. I don't have to wait for, a TA YouTuber to post the levels of interest that he's looking at. I can find them myself, and what I've noticed is a lot of times the levels that I mark out on my chart as extremely significant, a lot of other TA YouTubers will have those same areas marked out as well. And, even if they're not doing the same things I am, like, I'm sure you guys notice that I do a lot of the same things Jason Casper does because, I'm basically learning the TA strategies that he uses. But, some other people may have these same exact areas of interest marked out and they may have gotten it a completely different way. Um, TA is weird and it works like that sometimes where some people will have the same level marked out but get it for completely different reasons. And I think that is because, these significant areas just tend to have a lot of different things pointing to them. And so the more reasons you can find to point to a level to classify a level as significant, the better. And so that's why I like to have all of these levels marked out in folders. But yeah, I think that is pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this video. If you watched through the entire thing, you're a beast. Shout out to you. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really helps out my channel. I appreciate it a lot. And I will see you all in the next one. Peace.